Hello, everyone. Again, this is Lisa Retamozo with Nosotros Education Center, and I'm also here with Leah Walls and also Donna Walls. They're going to be monitoring the chat. Let me know if you can hear me okay, if there's any issues with audio, video, or if I'm talking about something and I think that I'm sharing something and I'm not, please let us know. Also, you could do that in the chat. And if you wouldn't mind, it would be great if you could in the Q&A go ahead and put your questions there. We may or may not get to them. We have a lot to cover. I'm going to try to do my best. We had a little chit chat before the webinar to see if, Leah and Donna will be looking at the Q&As, and if I'm on a field that question is appropriate to, then I will do my best to answer it live. I don't know if we'll have time at the very end, but whatever questions are not answered live, we are getting a transcript or a recording of that so I can do, a follow up and try to get that answered if we don't get a chance to do that. Okay, just letting you know. Also, we're going to need to keep the questions related to the APR field if at all possible. And everything originates from the APR, so it's natural that questions about recruitment, eligibility, selection, definition of academic need, those have to come up because of what we're talking about, like here's the answer, but where do I get the answer or where can I look for that? So I don't mean to brush those off at all, but if you would go ahead and put your question in the Q&A, and if it would be better answered separately or discussed during our professional development workshops that we're having later on in August, Leah and Donna will be putting some information in the chat regarding those, where we spend, 8 sessions talking about everything like that, including the APR again. We've also got a grant writing workshop next week, which is one of the things that we do that is not an allowable cost where you can't use your grant funds. Um, but everything else that we do through NEC to help TRIO programs, with professional development, compliance assessments, policies, procedures, and these free webinars, in addition to helping you with the APR, if you actually need someone one-on-one to meet with you. You'll also see in the chat, we're going to put information about that, or you could always go to our website that under the shop, and it will list that. And the services that you can get APR technical assistance is something that if you feel you need additional help besides these free webinars, check it out, schedule something on when it works for both of us, and you'll get more information about that. Also, when you get a chance, go to our free resources page. It's under resources, and you've got a lot of downloadable resources there as well, and information. I'm going to update one of these days, have a folder just for Upward Bound, but right now you can see there's information about anything that relates to TRIO overall. Okay. So check those out when you get a chance. I think we have a poll, Donna, if you'd like to launch that poll just to get a read the room. And while we're launching that poll, you should see on your screen the Google Drive that I forgot to make it where you can access it on your own. My bad. People were emailing me saying, I'm trying to get into this folder for the Google Drive and it says I need access. So it should be wide open for y'all. Thank you for answering the questions. While that's going on, I just want to go ahead and let you know that in the Google folder, right now you have a folder that says Draft 2526 NEC APR documents. All we did was we took the final documents, which are in here as well, the Department of Ed 2425, and updated the years. Okay, that's all we did. These, of course, are draft. They're not the final instructions. I do not believe there's going to be a big change between what was required from the department in 2425 for 2526. So we did a draft. It's not the final one. The final one won't come out until a month until the report's due. Somebody remind me there in the chat. I forgot to double check, or it's in the instructions. I think we left the original what we think will be the new due date based on last year. So it's going to be a minute. You definitely don't want to wait to get started on that. And again, you have the original ones, the latest ones for 2425 untouched. And for those of you that use Bloomin', which I'm going to check out here, there is also their 2425 guide on how to work on the APR. So have you ever completed a UB or UBMS APR? We have the majority of folks out there have done it. Great. So welcome back. You probably need this as a jump start to get you into the right frame of mind to start working on the APR, just to double check that you're on the right track, right? Some of you may be brand new and going, I don't know what to do. Okay, this is the webinar for you. And we also offer those additional services. If you need that one-on-one service as an allowable cost, check it out. You get more information there. Which database will you use to work on the APR? We've got 61% Bloomin. We've got a few using Empower. And let's see here, Donna. Some using Lakai, Student Access, and good old Excel. Great, 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 great. So I'm gonna stop sharing. So, full disclosure, I've used Bloomin for gosh, over 30 years. So I'm used to that. I'm biased. That's all I've ever used. I can help people with other platforms if you're using something else for the one-on-one because the APR, the fields are the same. They're pretty much built. They may look differently. They may pull data from a different part, but the APR is the APR. Okay. So again, thanks for joining us. We're about to start going through one of the documents that we've updated for you based on the 24-25 APR, and that's going to be the instructions. So let me show you that. I have that up here. Donna and Leah, we're okay, or everybody have to give me a thumbs up if you can see that I'm now sharing a document that says instruction. I mean, introduction, sorry. Thank you. Okay, great. All right. So just a little bit information about this. We've updated in red the year. This used to say 24-25, so we simply changed it to 25-26. You know what? That sounds like easy, but it's not, right, Leah? I mean, it's not as easy as it sounds because some things you do update the years and some years you don't. And so it's really hard to explain until you get into the fields. And I'll try to do that. If you're wondering, well, how come she updated and read this, but not here or not over there? Okay, we'll get to that. But I do want to point out that please, 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 this is a what, 17-page document or 20 something pages, I think. Let me see. Ooh, longer. 30 pages. I promise you. And you know what? Usually the good stuff's in the beginning, right? In this case, I got a lot more uh, information, confirmation, guidance from when it started to tell me about the definitions that apply, which is toward the end of this 30 plus page instructional document. All right. So, and I'm guilty of not reading the directions, right? I jump right into let me figure it out. That's fine. But when you get stuck, don't forget you can come back here and look. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that this 30 plus page instructional, it says introduction and it's called, the document name, I believe it's the instructions. That's where I got the instructions. Let me tell you, this is a great onboarding, a great reference guide to have handy the whole year, not just when you're working on the APR, but it's got some good stuff. We say, oh, hold on to your proposal and also to your regulations for upward bound. I say, actually, this probably I go to first, equally as my regulations for upward bound, but this is right neck and neck. If it's not spelled out in your regulations, the guidance that you get from your APR instructions is great, priceless, priceless. The majority of the questions I get or I see on Facebook, if they're not easily found in your upward bound regulations, they're in the instructions for the latest APR. So please hold on to it, bookmark it, keep it on your desktop. You're going to get a lot of great information from it, not just when it comes time to do the APR, but at any point in time, I find myself going back, copy and pasting the answers to the questions that people have. Okay. Donna, before we get started on the other form, is there any other questions or things that are important or so far that we've covered?
No, I don't think so. I don't see any questions yet.
Okay, great. And I don't want to scare people not into asking questions, but just letting you know that we've got a lot to cover. But please, when we get to some part of the APR that is, um, needs clarification, please put it in there. And if we can't answer it now, we will answer it later. Now I'm going to skip. I'm now going to the document that says UBMS form. Okay. And I am going to purposely skip section 1 This is something that we will have another webinar for free when the actual 25-26 APR is released. And what we will do is we will have Lourdes, a lot of you know that she does a lot of our webinars, take us through section one and section two as though it would look like on the website. Okay, so I'm gonna purposely skip that for now because that part I can work on later. The CPPs, we'll talk about those later. This is something that, Section three, wanting to know about your target schools and if they're on the most recent grant proposal, all that we'll talk about in more detail. I want to get into the fields. I want it quick, not quickly, but as uh, how we can do this is getting straight into these fields that whether they're on your Excel or in Bloomin or Lakai or Empower, these are the bits of information that need to be plugged in for each student. And I will cover and go along and give like little tips or reminders of when this data should be collected. I do know that the majority of the fields for any new student, the majority of them, the heavy lifting, so to speak, is when somebody is brand new. When they're new is when you have to put in the most answers for the most fields. The good news is that after that first year, especially if a student, if they remain active, when I roll them over to be continuing to the next year, I don't have to start over, right? The majority of their fields will answers will follow them, including, if it's someone who's a freshman and we answer at the end of their first year toward all those end of APR fields that talk about, well, where are they going to college? What college are they going to? All those senior 12th grader related fields, I can go ahead and put not applicable, and it stays that way for what, a couple, 2 or 3 years until they're finally a senior. But when somebody is new is when I have to roll up my sleeves and put in the most information. And most of the APR information for anybody that's new, you gather upon entry before you even provide services to the student. And that beginning of their selection information to put in the APR and the majority of these fields at the very beginning will stay with that student forever. So as you start 26, 27, or get ready to start, if you don't already do this, I would strongly recommend whenever you have a brand new student that you fill out from their application and then maybe your verification of eligibility and selection form or needs assessment that you do when you review their new application, that you purposely make sure that document where you select the students forces you to look for the information that needs to be added to the APR upon entry. Upon entry, not, oh, let's just put their name in and their address, their parents' name. We'll worry about that at the end of the year. If you do that, it's going to be very, very confusing to do that because you're going to know too much and you're going to have to think, well, what were they when we first met them? Because it makes it sound like maybe do they mean afterward? Believe it or not, it does get confusing. Or maybe it's just me, the older I'm getting, I can't do that anymore. Right. The other tip I would give you is that um, I would strongly recommend that you first work on all these fields for only a group of students at one time. You know that your APR consists of your active and served students plus students that are being tracked only. So it's not just your, for example, if you have to serve 60, you have to report on at least 60 plus everybody else that used to be in the program, including those students that graduated and went on to college that you're tracking, right? So you've got two groups of students pretty much. You've got your active and served, and you've got your prior year. I would say right now you put the prior year separate in their own little category and almost for just a little while pretend they don't exist. Then within your active, certain reported students, you have ninth through 12th graders. Within that group, I would strongly recommend that you separate them as well. Among your 60 active, served, and reported students, new and continuing, I recommend that you first deal with your ninth through 11th graders together. That's a different mindset because these students are too young to graduate. So the majority of their answers, almost 20 fields, will be not applicable or has not graduated from college, from high school yet. And since they're all going to have the same answer as not applicable, in most of your databases, instead of having to do them one at a time per each ninth, 10th, and 11th grader, you can get field whatever. I think it's, don't quote me on this, 34 something asking, about their high school status. And all of them would be still enrolled because they haven't graduated yet. So rather than do that or make sure to check it individually for maybe 40 of my kids, your database should be set up so that you could grab that field, grab all those students in those grade level and make it so that you click one time to give you the answer to that field instead of doing it 40 times. You do it one time. So I take care of those 9th through 11th graders first and get their APR to be perfect. And then I switch over to work on my 12th graders one at a time. Okay. Because they require more detailed follow up and checking because now we're talking about the majority of the objectives. Okay. All right. So, anyway, remember, out of the whole big APR, focus just on the 60 or the ones that you're funded to serve. And then within that, split them up to be your 9th through 11th graders and then your seniors. And that's way I believe also it gives you a different mindset for each one. And you're less, I think it's a way to get less confused about what answers go with what field. Okay. So let's assume that you figured that out, but let's go through all the fields unless there's any other questions. I don't see any questions, but let's keep going. All right. On your databases, hopefully most of them will automatically pre-populate from another window your PR award number. Okay. And for this coming year, it's going to be the batch year for field number 2 would be 2025. And then you indicate whether you're upward bound or upward bound math science. Okay. Demographic information, that case number. Case numbers you would have for anybody who is a continuing student or a prior year student would have a case number. But anybody that was new to you all in 25-26, anybody who has not been submitted with an APR, you will not have a case number yet. Okay. All right. Now, some of y'all may be looking at your database going, wait a minute, I have a bunch of continuing kids in 25-26, and they don't have a case number. And you just said only new kids. Well, that's probably because those students right now that are labeled as continuing right now for 25-26 that do not have a case number, that means they were new in 24-25, right? And I don't know if you realize this, but when you submitted your report, when you submitted your Excel file from whatever you got it from Blumen, Lakai, straight, Excel, whenever you uploaded that to the website, the Department of Ed website, then they spit another version out to you to download along with your PDF. So hopefully somebody there who did the APR for 24-25 downloaded not only the PDF, but also their version of the Excel file after you submitted your version. Then the Department of Ed, after they verified and checked it, added on the case numbers for new kids for last year. And in the excitement of getting the APR turned in, probably a lot of people didn't realize it said somewhere there, hey, we added on the case numbers for the new students you just told us about. You can download them and plug them in. And depending on your database, you could do it one at a time or you could do it in a batch. Do you need the case numbers during the year? No, but now you need them. So if anybody's looking at their database and they say, wait a minute, I have a bunch of continuing kids with no case number, look for that Excel spreadsheet that came from the Department of Ed, not from your system that you uploaded, but what they kicked back to you. And if you can't find it, it's not the end of the world. You'll be able to access it again once the APR opens up. But that's why I always tell folks that, or the clients that we work with, I said, look, you need to, don't, I know you're excited that we just turned in the APR for 24-25, but I need you to download this PDF and also this Excel file. You put it in a safe place on a drive that someone else can access. You send it to your boss, you send it to your certifying official, you send it to grants and contracts. So if for some reason you can't find it, they have a copy. Or if you're no longer here, they have a copy so they can go ahead and get a head start on plugging in the case numbers for last year's new kids. And also, it remembers who should continue to be reported. So when we get to the prior year students, um, portion of the APR, we don't have to wait for the department to tell us, oh, you forgot so and so. No, we can go ahead and get a head start on that. All right. But it's not the end of the world if you can't find that Department of Ed APR 2425 Excel file that they sent you back or that you're supposed to download. You will be able to get it later, but you cannot get it any sooner. You could ask, but they're going to say nope. You're going to have to wait till the website opens again. Okay, so field number 5, participants' demographic information. It's last name, first name. It must match. So whatever, if they were a continuing student, let me tell you, you put an extra comma, an extra character, it's going to think it's a totally different name. So it's going to have to match. And sometimes our students want to be called something else and they've made it change within when they were brand new. I always put that in my notes, but I kind of have to keep the same name. I know there's a place where you can request to change the name, and we've tried to use that. Let me know anybody out there that if when you've ever used that field where it's toward the end where it says if you want to change someone's name, and so you go, okay, yeah, I want to change their name. It hasn't worked. You think they accepted it and made the change, and when you go ahead and submit, they go, who is this person? We don't have anybody by that name. So I don't know. Maybe that's they meant for it to work. It's never worked for me. Let me know if it has worked for you. Middle initial again, and it tells you this must match what was on the record, what was on the APR spreadsheet for 2425. And then we have date of birth that needs to match. Let's see. It's no longer gender, where the column is or the row is called sex, and then you go male, female there. And then they break down into the ethnicity categories. And so far, all of these are things that should be answered when somebody's new. Get it over with, put it in. Don't wait to do it later, please, please, please. So that takes us through field number 15. And then we deal with eligibility. So eligibility at time of initial selection, this is where they calculate your two-thirds, if you've met that two-thirds. And so you have the breakdown here. Um, and you've got, the usual low income and first generation, then low income only, first generation only, then at risk for academic failure. Now, if you select somebody who is eligible to be in the program only because they are at risk for academic failure, maybe they're low income and at risk. Okay, so you would select that. So you just have to pick one of these things, right? So you look at all your different things that you could. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Is that okay, or do you need it a little bit bigger, you think? Let me see. Okay, I don't know if that's going to throw anybody off. Okay, a little bit bigger there. You have your choices here. So you have all these combinations here. But if you select somebody who's a code 4, 5, a 6, or a 7, then you are going to have to, well, everybody has to make a selection, but for 17, they will expect for you to go into more detail about why you think they're at risk. And we can determine why a student needs our services. So we and the regulations state that the grantee needs to come up with a definition of what they would say, well, you know what, the student needs our program because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, we can do that. But we cannot say, oh, the student needs us because they're at high risk for academic failure. Once you use that, either code 4, 5, 6, or 7, then you must be very specific to select one of these answers that per the regulations states, okay, and by the way, upward bound math science, you are not allowed to select anybody who's at risk for academic failure. Regular UB can, but these are off limits for upward bound math science. So if I did select someone who is at high risk, then it would be, well, are they at high risk for their language reading proficiency? Then I would make the selection here. Student did not achieve the proficient level, um, or they did, or if everything was fine and I just did regular, I'm coming up to just do a need that was not based on high academic risk, then I would put not applicable because they were not they did okay. They're not at academic high risk. Okay, so it feeds into that. So you can't skip it. You must answer it for every student, and it's at upon selection. So you want to go ahead and do this upon selection, not later on, because it gets mixed up with, okay, is this how they did at the end of the year? And they even tell you at the time of initial selection. That takes us into field 18 as well. So, field 18, if you did select somebody that is at high academic risk, then they almost have to match or be possibly in the GPA of 2.5 or less. All your other students hopefully are at, from the very beginning, at 2.5 or higher. Number nine is strange because this is hasn't changed in a million years, and this is where the year doesn't change. There's somebody who was served before 12, 2012, 17. Nobody's doing that. So you either have one or two for all your students. So all your students from the get-go, they're either coming in with a GPA of 2.5 or less, which would match the at-risk uh, for academic failure based on GPA, or they'd be coming in with a GPA of 2.0 or 2.5 or higher. And then 18 will ask about pre-algebra. So you have pre-algebra, low GPA, and if they tested below math and English whenever their last state assessment were, are the only three reasons where someone can get selected under the label of only because of high academic risk. Okay. So that if you go back and study that a little bit more, use that as your guide as you're selecting students, that should give you more guidance whether or not you should go there or what classification you should select, because it tells you the definition. It forces you to relive the definition, so to speak. Hopefully, I hope for you that for most of your students, you'll be able to say either they are not 10th graders yet, or that they did fine, that they successfully completed. All right. Remember, students for Upward Bound have to show some sort of academic need, but it doesn't mean that they have to show the most academic need. And you get to come up with that definition. And usually, folks are supposed to have that definition in their plan of operation, where the plan to identify, recruit, and select. It's not just if they're eligible based on low income first generation, but also if they show a need for project services. And it never does it say that you must have the most need. Maybe if you run into a situation where you do have a waiting list, then you could say we use a matrix so we can give points for types of need based on our definition. And if we have a waiting list, then we go by their score. Otherwise, if there's room available, and there's a slot and they have one instance of academic need, however we determined, so be it. It could be their essay. They either get they're seeking information, or when they checked off what they think they need, whatever. There's no right or wrong as long as you have it in writing that this is your definition, and you can update it as needed. Now, again, it tells you grantees must report on all new participants. Continuing and prior year students should have received these when they were brand new. And so there's a column here that says if it needs to be checked or updated, and it should tell you that as well if you want to look at that. Plus, you can look at the instructions and gives you more detail there. Now, field 20 wants to know if they're limited English proficiency, either yes or no. And it also tells you if you want to see the definitions, look in the instructions. This should not change. So again, heavy lifting when somebody's brand new. I should never have to bother with fields 1 through 20 something. I should go straight into fields 30 something every year to update as needed. And if they're ninth, 10th, and 11th graders, I don't have to make as many updates because a lot of the information stays not applicable because they haven't graduated from high school yet. Okay. The heavy lifting is again when they're 12th graders. Okay. So when they're new and then when they're 12th graders. Okay. All right. So eligibility and selection, field 21, they want to know if they're disconnected youth at the time of their initial selection, not annually. And again, what's the definition? They tell you to look at the definition here. They actually go ahead and put it here, but they have further information in the instructions that I briefly showed you. Okay. So I don't see a lot of those. I don't know if you do, but it could happen. Then we get to field 22, eligibility and initial selection. See how all these fields are supposed to be completed upon entry. This is where hopefully I didn't have students that were in high academic risk. Maybe they were low income, first generation, maybe they were both, maybe just low income, maybe just first generation, but they didn't have those issues like a low GPA, hadn't passed the latest math or English state test, or they struggled with algebra. Okay, so these are what a lot of folks at the time of initial selection, think that they have to use because it's listed on the APR. So some people have based their definition for academic need, which makes sense, right, from these choices. But then the regulations kind of contradict that and they say, no, you're supposed to come up with your own definition. Okay, well, I did. Okay, well, do any of your overall definition, I guess you got to come up and go ahead and pick one of these that kind of like is an overall statement of what you've come up with internally. Um, for SSS, they have predictive indicator. Same thing, but I like that because that the definition says you're looking at qualitative and quantitative things, asking the students, looking at their essay, and then you look at their grade report or transcript. So you kind of have a combined, looking at the feelings and also some numbers and performance, academic performance to come up with that. There's not really one here for that. So I tell folks, look, you could either select other, and it says, if needed, use code 14 other for categories of academic need used by your project, but not listed in the list of options. But it does say they want you to use it sparingly. Okay. So then fine. I could possibly say, you know what? One of the things she also mentioned is she had a lack of career goals, or we noticed when we asked her on her essay, or she needs information or support, or he or she is at a target school where they don't really have a lot of AP courses or they don't push them academically. So we're going to do that every summer. Okay, so it could be that you decide that everybody is a seven. They have a lack of opportunity, support, or guidance to take challenging college prep courses. So be it. It could be seven for everybody because you have for each student individually their needs assessment. Okay. That is sort of the receipts for how you came up with the overarching reason of number seven, for example. You could pick the other things as well. I just don't want to, I want to make it clear that these are not supposed to be the only reasons why you're selecting students. Okay. Now, if it was a student that was selected earlier, we indicated because they were at high academic risk, then I would select code 16 because it would say their need was identified in one or more of fields 17, 18, and 19. It's like I already told you. We already talked about them, remember? Oh, yeah, that's right. Then tell me, give me a code 16 for them. But for everybody else, which I hope are most of your students, your new students, which one of these fits under. Okay. It's not wrong to use these codes because they are there, they're choices. I just wanted to make sure you knew that you weren't restricted to only go specifically by these options. If your definition, after you review it, you can make it fit overall under the, that they have a lack of opportunities to take challenging college prep courses, which is probably the case, right? All right, 23, we'll ask about the target school. The UB regulations define target schools as those designated by the grantee as the focus of project services, the focus. And please note here that they want to know the target school that the UB or the UBMS student attended at the time of entry. That's very important. At the time of entry. At the time of entry, they needed to have been enrolled at one of the target schools, but it doesn't mean they have to stay at the target school. If you're in a city where they transfer across the city into another school, I mean, if they started with y'all when they were at the target school, but then switched schools later on, depending on if they can still make it to y'all, if they're not that far away, or if you're able to continue providing services. Because remember, if you report on them, you're stuck tracking them anyway through high school graduation. You have some choices now. You could have a policy and you'd be 100% supported by anybody. Where if you have a policy stating, you know what, we only serve students that stay at our target schools. Well, that's you, and that's fine. And that may work out best, and you may have a waiting list. But that means that if they leave your target schools, of course, you have to keep tracking them until they graduate from high school. And then if they end up going to college on their own, you have to track them through college, for 6 years after that. Just be aware of that. That's fine. Or you could do case by case. And if a student's not going to the target school, maybe take into consideration, okay, um, let's see where, if we can serve them. How long can we keep serving them? Because remember, still stuck tracking them. I might as well keep trying to serve them somehow way. Can they still make it to us? Can they do online tutoring and come do our Saturdays or our summer component? Maybe we can make this work. If it doesn't start working, then you have to bless them and let them go, and they would be not served, not active. They'd be reported, but you still have to track them. Okay. So again, um, sometimes people, students or folks are thinking, well, I thought you couldn't. No, I mean, it's probably depending on your situation, best practice or a policy for you to say, no, we're not going to continue to serve you, but I got to track you. So you'll hear from me, once a year, or I'll be looking your grades up once a year until you go off to college, and then be tracking you. Or are you able to have the resources, the staff, the personnel to encourage them to and keep tabs on them to keep coming to y'all for services, even though they're not the target school? Bottom line is, a student does not have to continue to stay at the target school if you want to continue to serve them. The question is, how well are you able to serve them? And if you can't do it because you're rural, then you have no choice probably. All right. So here we have data first project service. They don't want to know when they were accepted. They want to know when they actually received a service. This is a very important field. 90% of the time when I get asked or told of a situation where, we have this student and this is going on here, this, and they tell me everything except I have to say, wait a minute, when was their first data project service? What did you put down for field 24? And it never changes. And it's not, well, we recruited them and they did. I said, I want to know when they received their first service, because it's very, very important in Upward Bound, the timing, okay, the timing of the service of the calendar year when it happened, and it doesn't change. So very, very important. It will impact a lot of things. So the majority of your error messages, if you start, sometimes you get stuck and you're like, what did I do wrong? I always reset by looking at that field, and I go, okay, something is wrong between, 24 is not jiving with, or whatever I put someplace else is not making sense with field 24. Most of the errors originate that come from other subsequent fields not exactly matching with 24, and also participant status. So it's a quick fix, but it will drive you crazy. Okay. And again, that stays the same even if someone comes back, leaves and comes back, their data for service remains the same. My grant mentions students in my target area. Does that allow me to accept virtual students who live in our county? Well, again, when you go to the APR, they're going to want to know your target schools, right? They're going to ask that. And then they're going to ask, they're going to ask you then, okay, separately, earlier, wrapping up in section one or two, what are your target schools on your grant? Okay. And then they'll ask you for every student when they're brand new. Okay. What is their target school number? So put the target school number. I mean, you said they're virtual. Go ahead and put their numbers in and see if hopefully you don't get an issue. And if there is an issue, then a pop-up window may come up and you can explain. Or worst case scenario, you may want to the folks that are the APR help desk, ask them, or you can ask your program officer ahead of time. Okay. Now, again, you can work with students in your target area. The issue is because the APR is very specific about what target school did they attend when they first were selected. So it doesn't come out and say it, but I feel like, how they don't come out and spell it out, say it, but I'm going to tell you, it's like they say, you know what, hey, after their first year, we don't care, what school they're going to, but we're obsessed with when they are first selected, that according to this, to be matchy matchy, they should be attending. I'm not saying they can't. Um, your official list of target schools that we have on file, because you turned it in. I don't know if you turned in your grant, but there was a program profile sheet where you had to put in your target schools and their numbers. And so that's where they're coming from. And then they're asking you again, to confirm it. And so there may be a little bit of a, discrepancy there, but I would go ahead and try to find out right now for your program officer, or the minute the APR support desk does, if you get an error message, if you go ahead and put in the what is it, NCES number of their actual school. Okay. And let me know what happens there. But knowing that, I would try to avoid it by trying to initially get my students from my target schools. But there's always an exception for the rule. Regarding this policy that you're mentioning, would this mean our program would need to actually have a document somewhere in our office, possibly in your procedures manual? Do you mean about your policy of the non-target? How you decide to track students since it's kind of your choice? If that's the case, yes. And you always want to give yourself an out that modifications can be made as needed. Every policy that you can develop as a director, you always want to, put in there other situations will be determined or other cases will be or determined case by case status. But your overall policy would be yes, yes, you would put it in writing. It would be perfect for your policies and procedures manual if we're talking about or anything we're talking about because the regulations leave a lot of interpretation up or the regulations tell you look this is what you have to do, okay, but and it's saying here it's leading me to believe that you need to start these students at the target schools but then after that first year there's a policy you can have. You could say, no, that's it. You go to our schools, or we're going to replace your slot, and I'll just be stuck tracking you. Or depending on what we can do and what capability we have, let's do it on a case by case. And that's probably the safest thing to do. Okay. So thank you for that question, and I will keep going on here. I think we don't have any more questions here. All right, so then 25 is asking for their, and by the way, 24 in data for service, that should actually come from your database when you get, I'm sorry, no, that's, yeah, data for service. When they show up for their first workshop, when they show up for your orientation, that hopefully you also are providing services. So you could say, look, they just didn't come to orientation. Yes, we told them about the summer component, but then since we have parents there too, we kind of forced a little something something about financial aid or financial literacy or something like a walkaway service. So now it's orientation plus they receive two services today plus their parents attended, so it's parental involvement. Yay. We do all that. That data first service usually when somebody's brand new, we leave it blank, field 25, because they get selected, then they get told they have to show up to orientation or the first visit. And then when they actually show up and sign in, then we enter that into a different part of the database as a service provided. And your database should be taking that first day of the first time they receive all services, but it should be connected so that first entry of service provided is automatically populated in field 25. So you shouldn't have to keep going back and forth. And you should be in a perfect UB world putting all their information in from a student who's brand new. And so far, fields, well, you don't have the case numbers, but all those fields except for the case number would be filled out, except when you get to field 25, you would skip it because you would say, look, they haven't had a service yet. Hopefully they will have a service, but we've put a lot of students in the program, not a lot, but throughout the years that didn't, everything's great in the interview. They come to orientation and they never come back. Well, then that's another decision we have to make, obviously, that we can't count them because they only showed up for one event and maybe they received the two services, but do I have someone else that I can replace them with? So that's yet another policy, that you probably have to draft when you make that decision or your internal rule regarding that. So again, when they receive their first service, it should actually come from a different transaction that populates here. But whenever that first service happened, they want to know what grade level were they when they first received that first service from y'all. And you've got choices here. You've got rising ninth graders, and it says not valid for someone first receiving services in the summer program. And then it gives you the rising, it gives you this detail here. And again, this is a critical field as well. Just like the field about what was their date of first service, you want to get their grade level correct for 25. So that's why if you wait to do this and do it later on, it can be very confusing. You're like, wait a minute, now or then? And you have to keep thinking, okay, that's why you can look back up to field 24 and whatever it says in 24 on that day that she received her first service, what grade level, what was she like a picture that day? You want to do it as soon as you can and not later on. Okay. Accuracy is particularly important for this field. All right. So you've got some more language there. So darn important. I think they go into a little bit more detail there. Yeah, see, look at this. And then there's about your summer kids. I'll get into some of that in our next webinar if you have any specific questions about that. But we do have, yeah, so already the clock is ticking and we're just halfway there, not even halfway there. Okay, so participation and status in secondary school. Well, this is something that I should be able to answer. Well, hopefully, technically by the end of the year, you know, hopefully, and again, this is more for it happens, but usually for students that we're just tracking. But hopefully, with a new student or some that you're updating your ninth through 11th grade, hopefully you're able to put code 9 not applicable, neither deceased nor permanently incapacitated. And if it was someone truly new, you probably wouldn't be putting somebody in there from the get-go if that's what happened very quickly. But that's what you want to. Hopefully, it stays a 9 forever. Okay. Which is not applicable. 27 is their status for the reporting year of 25-26. So now I've reached my overall assessment is that I want to make sure when somebody's brand new that I do fields 1 through 26 minus the field for the case numbers and minus the field for the data for service because that's going to come from a different transaction. But then most of these fields, I'm going to say not all of them, but most of these fields starting with field 27 are what I call end of year fields. So in my mind, generally speaking, I tell folks when I do training and when Bloomin, or the APR, I said, hey, every year, as soon as students are new, you want to go through quickly, as fast as you can, from the information that you have when they first started, do fields 1 through 26, with the exception of the case number and possibly putting in the data for service later on. Do that. And then when school ends in May, then you come or after your summer component, sorry, I forgot. After your summer component around this time, the last week of July, first week of August, roll up your sleeves and now we're going to do just end of year stuff because I took care of beginning of year stuff with my new students. And I might have double checked for my continuing students if they're in the right grade level to begin with or whatever. But really, the most of the heavy lifting was the new folks. So you don't want to end up now where you're still having to backtrack. And you probably, and it's okay, but it just make your life a lot easier if you only had to worry about fields, end of year fields starting with field 27, because 27 wants to know, well, their status, obviously if they're new, right? Or continuing. So you want to tweak that every year. And if they're brand new, it'll already be pre-populated in your database. But sometimes with some students that don't come back, we have to make them prior year students. And we call that our beginning of year procedure. Okay. So this would have to be looked at every year. And I'm sorry, you look at this at the beginning of the year. So you would look at 27, fields 1 through 27. My bad. It's fields, and then it has the breakdown here. If a student leaves you and comes back, they can be a continual reentry student. And then it's field 28. Field 28 is asking for participation level. So did that student who is active, certain, reported, if you're wanting them to count toward your active, certain, reported number, you need to tell them if they participated in both the academic year and the summer component, or if they were a senior and did the academic year and the summer bridge, or if they just did the academic year component, or they just did the summer component, or they just did the summer bridge only, or they are somebody who's in college already or who moved away before they graduated from high school that you're just tracking. But if you're claiming them toward an example, if you're claiming them toward your 60 that were served, that you're getting money to serve, then every one of those 60 students, you have to tell them how much they participated in. Okay. It's not an objective, but it's something that maybe later on they can look at, or run. I'm sure they're running surveys on that, but it's not an objective. And it's something that you need to check at the end of every year, and it's for the year. Now, for any of you out there, bless your hearts, if you're transitioning summer start projects only, maybe this happened last year and you're not having to deal with it, or maybe you're making your transition from being a summer start, May 1st, now you're going to September 1st. There was some additional guidance there, right? All right, so let's find out 29. This is to satisfy one of the assurances that you're going to do your best as, what do they say, the extent practical, that you are going to try to make sure there's not a duplication of services, so to speak, so that more students can be served. So they want to know if a student was both in UB and UBMS. Believe it or not, that used to happen a lot in the past. They want to know if a student's also going to be served in Veterans Upward Bound, if they're going to be in Talent Search and Gear Up or EOC or another program. Now, again, it's allowable. You can do that. I did it for many years when I first started my I had three talent searches, and then we started one and then two upward bounds. There were a couple of years that I had students in both, but I had to work extra hard. I had to make sure I had a policy that explained in writing overall to put in my policies procedures manual. Um, the rationale for my madness, so to speak, but stating that they get tutoring from Upward Bound and instruction from Upward Bound, that student, and they get field trips and financial aid information, financial literacy from Talent Search and college admissions assistance. Okay, so we had a clear division of what they would get from each project, so there was never a duplication. I did that until, people say, why do that? It's such a headache. You have to keep like contact reports or service reports of both projects in each folder. Yeah. Yeah. When you are desperate for numbers and you're trying to get your numbers, you will do some desperate things that are in compliance, but probably a headache to do. So as soon as we no longer had to struggle with numbers for a new program, after that first year, I changed my policy. I said, you know what, moving forward, no. If they want to switch over, they're going to have to pick. And talent search, don't be mad if your kid goes to Upward Bound. Upward Bound, some of these students are not coming to what they need to be coming. So, you know what, we gave them a chance. So we're going to put them back in, talent search, and we'll track them, but that's the way it is. So that's a policy call. But people will tell you, you can't be in both. Well, you know what? Actually, the regulations don't say you can't be in both. Um, so you can, but you may not choose to because it kind of is a headache. But come up with your policy. Maybe your policy is no. My policy is, and so when people tell me you can't do that, I say, well, what you're telling me is that it's your policy not to do it for whatever reason. And I completely, that's cool. And I agree with you, but that's not a regulate. You're not out of compliance if you do. You can choose not to, okay? Or you can choose on case by case. It happens. All right, so we've got the grade level at the beginning of the academic year being reported 25, 26. So 30 you could answer at the beginning of the year for a new student. You definitely want to answer it at the beginning of the year for continuing student, because this is at the beginning of the year. What were they? And here are your choices here at the beginning of the year versus at the end of the year. Now, some could say, well, she's a ninth grader, so I'm going to say she's a 10th grader by the beginning of 26, 27. Okay, you could do that. You probably are going to be 90% of the time correct. Just double check it because things happen, right? They might go on to another grade level or they may stay in the same grade level. But chances are, you're pretty accurate that yes, if they start at the beginning of the year, they were an eighth grader, even though I didn't start serving them until they graduated from the eighth grade in the summer, in the, um, at the beginning of the academic year, they could have been, an eighth grader to begin with, but by the end of the year, they were going, of 26, 27, the next year, they could have gone on to be a ninth grader. Okay, so that's something you could wait to do, or you could go ahead and do it ahead of time. Just double check it. Then we get into field 32, and we have to look at their high school GPA at the end of the academic year being reported. And I believe they have it two ways. They have cumulative grade point average for high school, and they have high school cumulative unweighted. And I don't know anybody out there in Texas. They told me, or I've looked and I couldn't find a difference. So we used whatever we had on their transcript. One GPA, 32, and 33 were the same, and nobody ever said anything. I believe it might be, I got to double check, y'all. Don't quote me. One of these fields is tied in directly to the objective on, what percentage of your students had a 2.5 or higher, which is one of your objectives, you know? So it's a critical field. I just have to look at the prior experience breakdown to figure out which field, if it's either 32 or 33. I used to remember it might be 33. But anyway, if you only have one set, you know, you don't have unweighted, I would use both. And again, this is something that you want to collect as soon as you can. This might be something some of y'all are waiting to get when school starts again, or do you all have access, or can you ask, or do you make the students and parents give you this information before they start the summer component or during the summer? Do whatever you can to get it. And people say, well, what do I need to document this? I said, an unofficial transcript, a grade report, something. You know, if you have to go back to the high schools to ask them that, okay. But think of a plan. Again, that could be your policy. I can't tell you, oh, this would be the best way to do it because I'm not in your target area. I don't know how your district works. You have to figure out what works for you. What could you possibly get, either hard copy or a digital copy, as a receipt that backs up that you said they got a 3.3? Where did you get that from? You know, where can you, you know, it'd be best to have that, you know, on hand because that proves they met that objective. And one of the things in a compliance assessment is we're asked to see for every student that you claimed said that they met this objective of having a 2.5 or higher. Okay, well, show me. I know you plugged it in, the APR, but where is their transcript or their unofficial grade report or something that shows where you got the information from? So, you know, and again, there's only, we may have 60 something fields, 67 fields, but there's only a handful that directly tie into PE points and meeting your objectives. And it's those that you need to get the verification for, some sort of receipt to prove where you got that answer. Okay. Not necessarily for every single answer you have here, but definitely for those that relate to the objectives. And this is one of the fields. Okay, either 32 or 33. I'll let you know. All right. So again, if they are a student who is a rising ninth grader, it tells you to put 8.888, you know, at the beginning of the year, by the end of the year, if they were one of the eighth graders, because it's asking specifically for high school GPA. Um, so it says, oh, it says if you do not know whether the GPA is weighted or not, enter 0.00. I've done it both ways and never got an error message for the weighted. Okay. Field 34. This is where I can start separating for all my ninth through 11th graders, where it says high school graduation status at the end of the year being reported. So by the end of 25-26, I know pretty much all my ninth and 11th graders are going to have the code of number one, currently enrolled in high school. I could do it one at a time, or in our system, I can select all the ninth through 11th graders, whether there are 50 of them, 40 of them, 36 of them, and in one click, make sure that they have code number one. And then tweak it as needed for anybody who did possibly drop out. Maybe someone who graduated early could have happened. But for our seniors, one at a time, we double check to see if they received their regular diploma or, you know, dropped out. Um, so we worry about that for the seniors one at a time and tend to do a group thing for the younger grade levels. All right. Um, the other thing is if they do graduate, then you have to plug in a date of graduation. Again, that's usually our graduating seniors. Okay, that date is there. And it's, yeah, it's very important, the high school graduation date. You want to make sure it's correct. You can't change it later on. And then 36 is also important. So 35 was where you get credit for your seniors graduating for that objective. But then when it wants, then the next objective, one of the other objectives is how many seniors graduate having completed, with a regular diploma, having completed a rigorous program. And this is where you would start for your seniors. You would look at their, y'all need to know again, there are 6 definitions federal in your regulations for upward bound, and they also are so important that they're in the instructions. So look under definitions, under UB regulations, or in the instructions, and they will show you what the 6 choices you have. But you really should go and look at your proposal in the objective section or possibly in the need section. Somebody should have spelled out Rigorous secondary school program of study means this, and that's what you go by. Some people say, oh my gosh, it changed, or they got rid of that, or what, then you need to update it as needed because you need to have some definition. You can't come up with your own definition. It's spelled out for you. You have six different choices, and you had to have selected one of the six. The first two are whatever the state says is a rigorous program. So people say, well, what about dual enrollment? What about AP courses? I said, well, I know there's one definition, the last definition, that talks about AP courses specifically, but it's very specific, you know? So check that out. Um, but if you want to say that, well, my student took an AP course or they're dual enrolled, isn't that a rigorous? Well, it all depends. There's a couple of definitions, federally speaking, that say whatever the state says is a rigorous program or whatever the state considers an honors or advanced program. And if they're in and if in their definition it lists dual enrollment or just being enrolled in one AP course, no matter how they scored, then that's great. So it's not an easy answer, but it could be an easy answer if you look back on what was in your proposal. And if it was clearly stated and if it fits and they said, look, this is definition number one or two out of what we were able to select, or you could find the title and match it up, then great. If you're struggling to find that definition, that's an issue. Not It's not something you can't fix because you then revert to, well, you know what? I don't know if this is the definition or this is valid anymore since it was written. Things could have happened with the state or they decided to change their definition. Then you can definitely need to update that and come up with something. But you can't make yours up, but you have to make sure it falls under one of the six definitions. Okay. All right, so let's look at persistence. Let's see if they come back. If they students, oh, actually, this is field 37 is a freebie. They no longer ask that. Back in the day when I first started, we had an objective, an upward bound, that if they stayed in school or they stayed in the project, it would count. If they stayed in the project, it would count. If they left the project, it would count against us back in the day. And so that's why people and directors didn't let go of the students that they probably should have because they said, oh, well, my retention objective is gonna hurt. Well, they got rid of that. So now it's no longer used. So just enter code 5 there. And then we get into fields 38 and 39 that are supposed to be mainly for the AP for the PE points, fields 38, participation and status in the meeting the high school state academic achievement standard at the proficient level for reading and language. That is calculated when they're 12th graders. So they want to know, did the student score at least proficient on the high school state English test? If they did, great. But some of our students take it before, like in Texas, they may take it as an 11th grader or even a 10th grader. So if you know that they have passed that, or at least at the proficient level at the 10th grade, then you can answer that for the 10th grade. You can put yes. The same thing down here for if they met the achievement standard proficient level of math, and you could select, yeah, they met that as well as 10th graders. Okay, keep in mind that it won't be counted though toward the objective until they're seniors. It just means that they met that objective earlier than they're going to ask you about it. Or some people will say, you know what, I do know for some, I don't know for some. I said, well, if you know, you know, or you could try to. They want you to try to be accurate every year with all your students if they take this test in the ninth, 10th, or 11th grade. All I'm saying is you definitely have to make sure it's correct on the APR that is for their 12th grade year because that's when it's going to count toward the objective. We have an objective, we have a GPA objective. We also have an objective that a certain percentage of students will score at the proficient level or higher in both math and English. And that's where that comes from, that answer, by the time they're seniors. So it's only calculated when they're seniors, but you can start collecting that information earlier than that. Okay, sorry. I hope I'm not making you sick here. Then we go to field number 40. And 40 will talk about the participation in advanced placement or IB course completed. It's not an objective. So if you know, you know, and you could put yes, no, or they're at a school that doesn't offer that if you want to know, if you get this wrong or forget for somebody, even a senior, no one gets hurt. It's not an objective. If you know, you know. Okay. 41 is dual enrollment. You probably know if a student's dual enrolled. So you can answer that for your students. It's not an objective. Dual enrollment if they earned any certificates through that. Now, some of y'all have students taking early college, high school, so perhaps you know that information. Again, you can answer, you have your choices here, and may say no, that they're not, or they're not all. Sometimes for all other participants means a nice way of saying no if they're not taking any dual enrollment to earn any credits. If you get this wrong or forget to answer completely accurate, it's not a problem. It doesn't count toward your objectives. It's just something that they want you to kind of keep tabs on, just like advanced math courses. If you know when you look at the students, when you're looking at the student's transcript or grade report to get the GPA earlier, you might want to glance ahead to see if they took any advanced math courses. You can answer yes or no. Okay. And it tells you beyond Algebra 1, courses consist of those that are more advanced. So they think geometry, Algebra 2, trig, and pre-calculus. It says, please provide data as available for all current participants and for those prior year kids who haven't graduated from high school yet, that you're barely, tracking once a year, if you can get it. Again, it's not an objective. You won't get an error message or they won't be able to really verify it, and you're not claiming it for an objective. Field 44 is usually for my seniors. So usually for the ninth through 11th graders, I could put, their code 8, not applicable. Student did not graduate high school or receive high school equivalency credits during the reporting year. So I could do that quickly for my younger students and then take my time on my 12th graders. And again, it's not just the 12th graders that are graduating and having been active in the program, but all those 12th graders that they should be with your program, but for some reason either they moved away, they stopped coming, but because they were reported on and it's now their 12th grade year, that's the fun where you have to try to figure this out for them. Participant status, again, date of last service for field 45, that usually that stays nines, 999999 if the student is new or continuing and was active in the program. Your database may actually have an actual date of last service because it's tracking whenever you document your services. The database that we work with will show an actual date, even if the student is new or continuing. And that's fine because it says there that once you convert it to Excel, it will change it to all nines. And I do need to know when was the last time we ever saw them because let's say next year they don't come anymore and the database has remembered for me when their date of last service was. So this date of last service really should have an actual date that converts to the spreadsheet is if it's somebody that is no longer being served by the program or their last date of service would have been at least in 24-25, but it would not have any dates for 25-26. It would be prior to this year, should be a date of last service. Once you plug that in for a student, it stays there. It shouldn't go away. But when somebody becomes inactive for the first APR, you will be asked that information. All right. And it's also those students who are being tracked, the students who graduated and who are in college being tracked. All right. Leaving the project. Again, if it's somebody who left the project the first APR that they have left you, they want a reason. So you pick a reason that stays there. If everything's great, then it's a code 99. They're still in the project. Or if they're a 12th grader, they graduated from high school. That's why they left. But you've got these other reasons here. There's no right or wrong, but they do need a reason. Even if they haven't left, the reason is not applicable or they were a senior. Then we get into some codes where they're interested in services, but for some reason they're interested in these services that are not required. Work study is not required. It's permissible, but they want to know in field number 7 if the student participated in it, yes or no, or if it wasn't offered by the project, or if they were a prior student, it would be a code 9. Work study is listed in the definitions. There's more information there, but it means internships or employment provided or arranged for by the project for the purpose of exposing participants to careers requiring a post-secondary degree. So again, that actually might be something that becomes more of a big deal, not necessarily the stipend for it, but the actual activity of work study. The internship, that's going to be something we're going to, apprenticeships and internships are what we're going to be talking about next week during the grant writing workshop. Field 48 is looking for employment. Again, this may be something that will probably, I thought it was going to roll off the APR. I think they're going to leave it on. They want to know if you help to arrange a job for them, or if they got a job on their own, or they don't have employment, or they're a prior student. And it tells you employment means jobs of at least 10 hours per week arranged by the project or upward bound that is separate from the upward bound program. Okay. So we'll go into that. Then they want to know about cultural activities. Again, I thought this was going to go away. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. They want to know if the student received any cultural activities. Yes, no, or not applicable. It's not offered by the project. So all of these are permissible services, but they're not required. And they do have a definition for that. Then community service. Yes, no, or you didn't offer it. They also have a definition in the instructions. And then they want to know if you offered tutoring to students that are limited English proficiency. Again, that might be something that goes away. Yes, no, not applicable. Again, it's not a required service. So, y'all, that's it when it comes to services. But you know that we have a set of required services we have to provide. The understanding is that in our evaluation plan, we have a way to be able to, on demand, come up with that information. And that's where your database should be tracking everything service wise that you provide, especially the required services. So if you ever have to on demand or get a compliance assessment, you can be able to show the names and the numbers of students that receive tutoring, instruction, and all that stuff. Just because it's not listed here on the APR doesn't mean you don't track that and have that ready to go. I don't know why they pick these random, of all the services we have, they're not even the required services. All right. No questions. We've got 17 minutes left. We are on field 52, 52 through 66. These are all about my graduating 12th graders and students that we're tracking that have graduated and went to college right away after high school graduation by their fall semester, and that we track for 6 years. Okay. So that means with the majority of my younger kids, the 9th through 11th graders, I'm going to be able to select code 8 for the majority of these fields, not all of them, but the majority of them. So please figure out on your system where it allow you to take all those students together and answer 52 through 66 as applicable for them, whether it's an 8 for not applicable or a 9. Sometimes it jumps behind that, between 8 and 9, depending on the field. So you don't have to do these fields individually for all your 9th through 11th graders one at a time. The only time you should be doing this one at a time is for your graduating seniors and for those students that you're tracking, going through college for 6 years. Okay. So give yourself a little bit of a break, right? All right. So we want to know what's our source of post secondary enrollment information for those seniors going off to college. Is it an official transcript? Is it probably not, right? Is it an institutional data other than official transcript? Maybe an unofficial, maybe it's a schedule, maybe it's unofficial transcript, self-reported. You could ask the student themselves. We usually developed, if I couldn't get it from the third party verification like Clearinghouse, I couldn't get them to send me a schedule, a screenshot, even if their student ID card, that says they're attending, whatever. I could, ask the student and they could tell me, this is as good as it gets. I'm going to tell you that I'm attending. I said, okay, let me fill out my little digital form that says we spoke on this day and you told me, and call it a day. I don't like it. Maybe it's my policy that I prefer Clearinghouse or some other, my preference, a transcript or a grade report or, like a screenshot of ID or schedule. But if I had to, I could hang my hat on number three. Okay. Then you have to the date, and that's very important. Accuracy is important. That's that post-secondary education into post-secondary cohort. Whatever you plug in here, and in the next field for 54 is the cohort of students, that we have to track on and on. And Leah, let's make a note to look at 54 because I don't know if we've updated that in 54. We'll update that. We've been struggling with this because we found out that the talent search is a different one. But I want everyone to who's submitted an APR in the past for Upward Bound, when you get a chance, if you haven't already, can you pull up your 24-25 PDF of the report you submitted and look toward the very end where it says what post-secondary education cohort was in effect last year, and we simply updated the number, okay, for the cohort. So it should be for your seniors now, for your seniors that are going to college right away. Their post-secondary education cohort is going to be field 2026. Okay. And it should be that we're no longer looking at students that went or tracking anybody that started college in 2019. According to last year's report and the changes that we made, last year, for those of you that had students that had gone to college 6 years before, it should have been cohort 2019 that we're looking at, meaning students that went to college for the first time in 2019, and then you were asked on last year's APR, did they graduate from college? So now we should be asked to look at 20 of the students that started college in 2020. So double check me. Lee and I have come back and forth, and I've asked some of my talent search colleagues to confirm that I'm on the right track. These numbers get tricky. But this is specifically asking for those students, that are going to college for the first time. That's why 53 and 54 are very important to make sure you answer correctly. Because once you put that date, and that date has to match the cohort, that locks it in as to 6 years later when they're going to come back and ask you about, well, did they graduate with a associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or what 6 years later? Okay. But this one right here is setting the cohort, and it talks a little bit about bridge, which could be confusing. Bridge is always, not bridge confused. Yeah, a little bridge confused me. But then for those of you that still have May 1st start dates plus a bridge, that gets really confusing. All right. All right. So code 55 or field 55 is asking for the college that they first attended. Right. So of course, with my younger students, it switches over to eights, not applicable, not yet completed high school. Right. But then we have nines for those seniors that completed high school, but they haven't gone to college yet. And for everybody else, you should be able to find the school code that they're going to, the college that they're going to, um, in the federal school code directory. But if you can't find it, you can actually plug in fives. Okay. All right. Then we have college status at the beginning of 26-27. So at 26-27, for each student, are they accepted into post-secondary but not yet enrolled? Or are they a first-year student following completion of high school, which is most of our seniors, right? Post-secondary student, again, if you're tracking, when you do your students that you're tracking, you might not go with one or two. You're looking at, yeah, they're still in college, continuing, and you've got your choices here. With my younger students that are still in the program and active, I can do a code 8. With my seniors of this year that have graduated but not going to college, I can do a code 9. And then they talk about dual enrollment. Okay, and you've got those questions there dealing with dual enrollment. Short answer, even if a student right now is dual enrollment, you can't count them going to college for the first time until it's after they receive their high school diploma. So they could have had, 20 hours of college credit by the time they graduate. Fine. For upward bound purposes, I can't say that their first day of college enrollment was prior to graduation. So I have to hope that they keep going in the summer or that they go in the fall. And that is when I would count them as first going to college. Crazy, right? Sometimes you have to be wrong to be right. And I think we'll have time for that question. I think we have one question. Field 57, this is tracking them to see if they've enrolled in what type of degree. Are they getting a certificate or diploma? Then you would say, well, if they completed it, you would say one or no. Maybe they're going for their associate's degree, or maybe they're going for a bachelor's degree, or maybe they're my young kids, so they would be an 8. A 9 is for someone who didn't go at all, who was a senior. But what about if it's somebody who is going to get their bachelor's degree? That I would put a 2 for the certificate because they're not going to get a certificate. They're going either for associate's degree or bachelor's degree. The same thing here in 58, they want to know if they did graduate with a certificate. Again, there's codes that would make sense if they were still in high school versus those that did not go. Or it plugs in, your database should be plugging in for you, or you plug in, you know what, I told you they're not getting a certificate. They're going for a bachelor's degree. Oh, okay, so you still have to answer. So again, the same student, now they're asking me, oh, so are they going to get an associate's degree? Did they get one? Well, no, they just starting. But really, I told you they're going to get a bachelor's degree, so it's going to be a code 2. And then when they ask for the date, well, it's still 2s because they're not going for an associate's degree. But if they were due, I could backtrack when it's on the next year if I find out they did. And again, it says here once date of associate's degree has been submitted, 1 year's APR, you don't change it. Now I have a freshman, I'm sorry, I have a student who's a 12th grader who graduated and he's going to college in fall of 2026. And he hasn't gotten his degree yet. He's not old enough, but yes, but he's, he is getting a bachelor's degree. So I'm going to say he's enrolled at 6, code 6, he's enrolled in. Now, as students get older and you track, some of these other options may be more applicable. And then they want to know when they got that bachelor's degree. If they were a student going for an associate's degree only, then I would have a 2 here. But I would also have that they're still in the program, all 6s if they're still in the program. They're too young, or if they left before. Again, this is very important. You want to track this. Once a bachelor's degree has been submitted to 1 year's APR, the date must not be changed. So they don't get credit for a second one, right? Then field 63, we're talking about the post-secondary enrollment objective. So they want to know for all the seniors this year, anybody who graduated, either your current students that stayed with you, plus your prior year students that should have been 12th graders with y'all but moved away that you're still reporting on, they want to know if they graduate with a regular diploma and went to college by fall of 2026. Or they want to know if they graduated with you or on their own and they got a regular secondary school diploma, but they received notification of acceptance, but they're not going until the spring, which doesn't happen that often. So we're hoping that most of our seniors are a code 1, that they went ahead and went. It's still okay if they're going to take the spring semester. Um, Everybody else is pretty much who doesn't go to college. Everyone else is nicely, instead of saying not going, they say, well, if you couldn't put them in 1 or 2 and they were 12th graders, then put them here in 3, which means no, they're not going. And then 8 is for everybody else, my younger students plus prior year students, because that just happens once. They graduate from high school and go to college in the same year just once. They want you to know if you're able to find out if a student is receiving remediation. Okay. So once they went to college, and most of our colleges don't even offer that. So that might be easy to answer. But then for your younger students, it's a 9, or for those that are being tracked, beyond remediation, they're older in and college, it would be, a 9. Then we get into field 67, post-secondary completion objective numerator for the reporting year of 25-26. And this is where I want you to let me know if last year you were asked to look at the 2019 post-secondary education enrollment cohort, see field 54. Because now we're thinking, we just updated the number now that we're looking at the students that graduated from high school and went to college by fall 2020. That those are the ones they're going to ask for. So You're going to be provided with, if you don't already have, a list of the students that you said went to college in fall of 2020. And they want to know how many of those students either got an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. Okay. Yes is one, a two is no, and then a nine is for everybody else because they're not in that cohort. Okay. And then 66 is about STEM. For those of you that have upward bound math science projects, they want to know when the student, the same cohort, did they earn a degree in STEM? And it wants to know a little bit more detail about that. There are your choices there. Again, if they're the younger students, um, everybody else is, well, if I'm not, I'm just in a regular UB, it's a code 8. What about my upward bound math science students that are not applicable? It'd be a code 9. And then it would be, oops, other also somebody who didn't earn their degree anyway, who was through UBMS. And then here's the last field where you can put the change in, but I've never been able to get it to work. Okay, so now that's going through the fields, and we have a couple of minutes left. Let me see if we have a question here. What data fields are most frequently overlooked but have a significant impact on APR accuracy? Great question. I think the ones that get overlooked a lot are those dealing with your 12th graders. Um, with the seniors, they get overlooked. Uh, and can cause big time issues. And I try to be really good about, I don't know if they get ever overlooked, but they maybe people are unaware of how important they are. Data first service, their high school graduation date, their cohort of when they go to college called the post secondary enrollment cohort. It used to be the most important cohort in Upward Bound wasn't necessarily when they started like it is in SSS. It used to be, oh, when did they graduate from high school? That was the big deal. Now it's switched. Now the big deal, the biggest cohort we worry about is when our graduated seniors went to college for the first time. And a lot of people, not a lot, but that frequently gets plugged in incorrectly. And then you realize afterward and you can't go back and change it. Date that and the date when they went to college, they go hand in hand. I see folks, I tell you all to triple check, or even on your younger students, for some reason, if their entry information, for example, their grade level, if it's off, it's kind of a pain to fix it later on. So I tell everybody, look, all your seniors, you want to make sure everything is correct as can possibly be, especially those about the tests and the GPA. But on your younger students, make sure that you get their data first service correct. And that often gets confused with date of acceptance. And that the grade level when they started is correct. And that's the number one thing I see where people have put in the wrong grade level. And they kind of have to stay wrong to be right, so to speak. Or you have to act like they were retained or promoted to make it work later on. So that's a great question. Thank you for that question. Let's see what else we have. That was done. Okay. Yes, you hopefully you will get a summary. You'll have that and you'll have the recording as well. I don't know if I'll have the transcript. I'm not sure if it did a detailed transcript, but I can see what I have and ask for it to do more of a detailed transcript. Anybody out there want to confirm that we're looking at the right year? Because Lee and I have been going crazy, and I've asked some of my colleagues, but I haven't had a chance to check my email. The cohort that they're asking you to look for should have been on your APR for last year, 2019. And now you should be asked about 2020. Can anyone verify that in the chat when you looked at your APR from 24-25 that they were asking you about 2019? That's what we're getting. That's what we're gathering. Anyone? You don't have to. You could just put it anonymously. Let me see in the Q&A. But I was hoping someone had their old APR out just to confirm. I mean, that's what we think, Leah, right? Because that's what the instructions said was 2019 last year. The post-secondary enrollment cohort was 2019 for the objective last year. So we're thinking, okay, we're going to move everything 1 year forward, so it should be 2020. Anyone? Let's see here. A couple of Old APR says 2019. It asked, okay, so that was 24, 25. So 25, 26 should be asking for 2020. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I wanted that clarification. Thank you all for joining us. We, again, will be having a more, not detailed, but we're going to cover the other aspects of the APR Section 1 and all those parts and what it'll look like on the website, of course. And let me see, we have a new question here. Let me see. Let's see. And also, the recording will come out. And if there's any information that you would like, you can go ahead and email me as well, or send us something through the website, and we'll try to get to that as soon as we can. And I'll try to get a more detailed transcript to you all that will be uploaded. Give us about 24 hours to get that uploaded. Thank you all so much. Check us out if you need additional information. You might want to sign up for some of the allowable cost APR technical assistance. Check that out on our website. All right. And maybe I'll see some of y'all at our grant writing workshop next week for Upward Bound. Y'all take care. Thank you.